to remember, it is still a sport that relies heavily on technical and tactical elements.
If you had to pick one moment, it's probably that day at Wembley.
The end that the balls start on, they have to move all the balls from one end to the other end.
This is a daily coaching football show where we talk football, insight, player and coach development. This is your host, David Webb, and I'm delighted today to announce our guest coach, Coach Yas. Yas, thank you very much for joining me. If you can, introduce yourself to the viewers and listeners so they can know a little bit about you.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for having me first and foremost. Looking forward to it. So for those that don't know who I am, probably everyone that's listening to this, my name's Yas. I'm currently working as a coach developer. Had over 10 years of experience working in youth development and more specifically, obviously, in the football space, working across various age groups of work. I've had experience working with males, females, both from seniors right down to, foundation phase, under fives and whatnot. A UEFA A licensed coach, and I'm currently the host and founder of the Coaches Network podcast as well. I think that should be fun.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Like I said, great experiences, cover a wide range of areas. And I think that your knowledge, your learning, your understanding is going to be vital to today's topics and conversations. So thank you very much for again joining me, Yes. And what we'll do is we'll get into the first section, which is discussion of the week. So for this week's discussion of the week, we're going to be looking at, are coaching courses still needed, or can coaches gain a better understanding of the industry or obtain more relevant knowledge through self-learning and development? Yes, first thoughts, what do you think around that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think, certainly over the last, since I started coaching, the coach education pathway has changed massively in terms of, the focus areas where, I started back in maybe just over 10 years ago. I know certainly when I came through, it was very much a tutor-led, setting, very much focused around the technical and tactical stuff. A couple, maybe within my first year into coaching, that's when they kind of released the, what was then known as the youth modules and the youth award, where they kind of had, this one pathway. You had the traditional level 1, level 2, UEFA B, UEFA A and whatnot, where it was heavily focused on that technical, tactical content. They've now brought out this other side of the spectrum where it was much more focused around maybe the 4-corner model, but more specific with the other 3 areas, so the psychological, the social, and the physical corner. And what you found was that a lot of coaches were quite contradicted in terms of, right, what do you actually want us to do here? Over the course of those years, where people were kind of having these conflicting messages, where just to kind of paint a bit of picture for those that maybe aren't familiar with it, the youth modules were kind of more geared around working with youth players specifically. And eventually, 2016 came in. We had the England DNA was launched by the DFA, where they kind of revamped the whole, the playing philosophy, but also the coaching philosophy. And in line with that was obviously falls into the coach education system, where basically took the best parts of the old courses and the best parts of the youth award, bang them all together. And now you've got the current pathway, and obviously that's under restructure again as we're in the midst of a pandemic. It's had a massive impact on that. So that's the first thing to kind of highlight on that. So there's been massive changes, but I guess to answer the question whether it's been more specific, whether they're still needed, I think certainly they're still needed. It's just, is the content that they're actually covering the most appropriate and relevant content for the coaches that are going on the course? Like I said, the top of that, a lot of the focus was around maybe technical, tactical stuff in the past, where it's not kind of, I guess I've had a bit of an opportunity to kind of get a bit more of an insight, because over the last 3 years, I've actually been delivering some of these courses for the FA. And what I found is that it's a completely different shift. So whereas maybe 10 years ago, I was doing my level 2, probably similar to when you did yours, you'd go on a course. If I was the tutor, you'd have to come on, I'd deliver maybe a series of 10 topics, so some exemplar sessions of those. And if you got given one of those topics, you pretty much have to deliver what I just delivered, like for like, almost to a T, in the sense that if I made a coaching point at 3 minutes and 22 seconds in, you were looking to do a coaching point at 3 minutes, 22 seconds in. And it was almost like if you didn't get that and you failed that script, it was almost a fail. And at least that's how it felt anyway. And I guess that's moved along so far now, because it's no longer about what the tutor thinks specifically. Yes, we've still got competencies that you need to hit as a coach. However, you get given, I guess, a longer time frame and more one that's contextualized to you. So whereas, as you know, the previous courses was literally, right, you show up, you do it a certain number of days, and then at some point in the coming months, you'd have a final assessment. Show up for your final assessment, and if you pass it, great. If not, fail, you've gone home sad. You've got to rebook it in the future. Yeah. I think the odd occasion you'd get some people that kind of deferred their final assessment for different reasons, but now the pathway is very different. So you'd still have your course days, and obviously, like I said, the courses have been kind of amalgamated a little bit. So the courses have almost gotten longer to an extent. They're a bit more in depth, but they're very much learner focused. So we might have 8 areas that we're going to cover in this course, but to what extent we cover them is dependent on the group that's in front. So on that note, every single course in itself, because of that, will be slightly different. Yeah. So we might scratch over those 8 areas, but we might spend a lot more time on area 3 because the group in front of us today might need a little bit more of that. Or we might go into a bit more of area C or D because the group in front of us has got a lot of experience in the other areas. So it kind of, in some ways, the courses structure themselves a little bit. So I think there's definitely still, that argument as to how important they are. And I think they're definitely very important. I think the key thing, though, is finding the right balance. Where I feel maybe the courses have maybe lacked a little bit, in my opinion, is, and it's a conversation I've had with many coaches, is around that technical, tactical stuff. There's a lot more emphasis now, or in my opinion, on the other 3 areas, the social, the psych, and the physical. And it's kind of moved a little bit away from the technical, tactical. I think it's fantastic that they've moved to a more holistic development approach. And I think that's just happening across the board, across all sports. However, we've got to remember it is still a sport that relies heavily on technical and tactical elements. Yeah. And we can't forget that. So if they're no longer getting it from the courses, the question is, where are they getting it from? How are the coaches learning this? And the argument then becomes, well, how important is it? Well, it's actually really important, because how can you coach a game that relies on technical competencies if you don't understand the technical elements? So I guess I consider myself quite fortunate in that respect, because I had the experience of going through the old pathway pre-2016, where I did my level 1, I did my level 2, I did my UEFA B license. And I was kind of maybe one of the last courses in, I guess, up and down the country that were as part of the old style B license, if you like. But then when I've kind of now furthered my journey, been fortunate and enough to go on to do my A license, go on and do the Advanced Youth Award. And for those that don't know, it's kind of like a level 4 qualification equivalent to the UEFA A license, but again, sort of a more specialized edition of the youth awards that were back then, where you kind of now go, rather than focus on youth football specifically, you're now going in more depth and maybe focusing on a specific phase. So as part of the Advanced Youth Award, you'd have the foundation phase, which is traditionally the 9 to 11s. But obviously with the introduction of pre-academies and things like that, that foundation phase is sometimes considered to be 5 to 11s. And depending on where you go and which club you're working with, some consider the foundation phase 9 to 12s potentially. A lot of clubs do operate with that 12s within their foundation phase. But, traditionally the 12 to 16s would be the youth development phase. And obviously you've got the 17s to 21s, or 17 to 23s, I guess, which will be your professional development phase before they obviously move into the senior environment. So they've got an opportunity to kind of go down that path. So there is an opportunity, obviously, to get range of experiences from the courses and loads of content from the courses. So definitely still relevant. All I would challenge is that because of the pathway and the way it is now, the A license I did wasn't really as what I expected in terms of the technical elements. And I think because I was quite fortunate in some ways, I guess, to have gone through the old pathway, but my A license that I was on was one of the first courses of the new format. Okay. So there was still a lot of crossovers in terms of, right, we still need to have some of this, we still need to have some of this, but having seen some of the stuff that's going around now, it's very much, right, come in, you're the coach, tell us what you're going to do and tell us why. Which I think is great, because it's challenging coaches to work in different ways. But for those coaches who are maybe going through the qualifications for, let's say, reasons that maybe their job needs it for them to keep their job, or you know, or they're maybe not that passionate about it, they may not be taking the steps necessary to go and upskill themselves in the areas which the courses maybe previously would have supported them with.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, one of the things you could kind of then you think, start asking yourself is, well, how important are the academic side of things now? More and more coaches are going to get coaching degrees. So that's becoming more prominent. I'm even doing one myself. So it's interesting because obviously as the years have gone on, people are becoming more qualified. There are more B licensed coaches. There are more A licensed coaches because the EBBB has demanded that clubs need to have more qualified people with a minimum requirement of their role. But what's actually happened in the process of that, in my opinion, is that it's also saturated and diluted the potential quality of the qualification,
100%.
or at least, you know, the competency that you'd expect to come through as a B licensed coach to start with, and then obviously later on an A licensed coach, is definitely, in my opinion, saturated and diluted the quality of people that are coming through with those qualifications, which then, you know, leaves you in a position where, okay, well, you can't really go much higher than an A license until you get to the pro license, which is already incredibly difficult to get onto. So where do we go next? Well, actually, if you've got an A license, you now need to go and get the advanced youth forward. You've got those two things. Now what do? Well, all right, well, now I'm going to go get a degree. So it is, you know, it is definitely important to get these qualifications. But again, the biggest challenges for learners coming or coaches coming through the pathway now is, what are they doing outside of that as, I guess, if you like, informal learning to kind of build their knowledge? Yeah,
100%. It's interesting. No, definitely. It's interesting. A few points I picked up on there. So, you know, taking it back to, like you said, the old style courses, I was very similar to yourself. I was one of the last to do the B license in, I think, early 2016. And I'll never forget this. Always tell this story. It was incredible. Like, again, it was in that format of the blocks. And then obviously on the final weekend, you know, everyone does their sessions, but typically a few people drop out and don't want to do their session on that final weekend. So they might do it another time or however they also arrange it. But I never forget, the sessions finished, I think it was on the Saturday about lunchtime-ish. And anyway, the tutors said at the time, look, do you know what, we're done for today. I'll tell you what, everyone come back tomorrow. Now, I hadn't booked a hotel because I've been traveling up, it was up in Stamford. And I've been traveling up each day. So I thought to myself, do you know what, like, you know, we'll be up there Saturday, we'll be up there Sunday, it's fine. So on that Sunday, I had to go up. It was a 2-hour, 45-minute journey, and I had to go all the way up there just to find out if I had passed or not. Now, fortunately, I had, because if I hadn't, that would have been a nightmare journey home. But I think it's things like that, you know, sometimes, and it's not obviously necessarily tutors' faults all the time, but I think in the old style, they didn't get that. And they didn't get the fact that, you know what, like you said, it's a driving lesson and it has to be done in our way. And something which I've learned as time's gone on is tutors are so different. You know, I could go to a course which is led by yourself and go to a course which is led by somebody else. Now, you may both have the exact same qualifications, maybe have been tutoring for the exact same amount of time, but I may get such more of a better experience from you because of just like how you've spoken there, whereas somebody else don't. So
I think you make a great point there, Dave. You know, it is definitely a challenge. And I speak to learners all the time, and it's an experience where it's almost like a lottery. Yeah. It's almost like a lottery. Not only, and there's so many variables to consider. One, the availability of courses, especially when you start going up the ladder towards B licenses, and especially when with A licenses, which obviously are only national rather than regional. But so it's definitely a challenge and a lottery in some ways, because you could get on a course, but you're fighting to get on a course firstly. And with the way the climate is now, people are willing to go outside of counties and outside of their region just to get on a course because it's so difficult, especially if you live in London.
100%.
London is such a competitive market in terms of trying to get onto these courses that on more occasions, or most occasions, they end up finding themselves in a situation where they're doing double courses. Which you don't usually get in most other counties. So that's one thing to kind of consider. So it's the availability of the course, not just the availability of the course, but then the times the course is set. So for instance, someone might pick one course over the other in terms of applying for a course because they prefer a particular tutor, because they've had experience or they heard good things about them. Someone might pick a course because they've got kids and they need a course that runs during half terms or something like that. So there's so many different reasons to why you can kind of go onto a course, and it really is a lottery. And, you know, over my last couple of years as a coach educator myself, I literally say to learners, it's a lottery. You might, you know, it's like Marmite. You might like me, you might not.
Yeah.
But I've got to maintain one thing, and is that I've got to do what I believe is the best way to, I guess, to educate these learners, and support these learners with their development. And for me, it is so individualized. And, you know, in some cases, I think what I've learned with my experience, I give an experience back to my first course. Actually, I remember my first course that I did. I was meant to assist. I wasn't meant to assist, but I was basically, there was two of us, but it was my first course. So I was almost meant to. I was delivering, but I was meant to almost shadow at the same time the person that I was with. And basically what had happened was, just for those that don't know, the level 2 split in 3 blocks as it currently stands. Obviously, that might be under review at the moment, but in 3 blocks. First block, I did it with the tutor that I was assigned with. And for one reason or another, the tutor wasn't able to continue the rest of the course. So because I knew the group, what ended up happening was I almost ended up automatically assuming the position of the lead tutor on the course. Even though on the next course I had someone else come in that was, I guess, in terms of seniority, was more senior than me. They had more experience, but they were from a different county. Yeah. But obviously there was no guarantees that they would, again, even when that person was brought in, they were meant to cover the next 2 blocks. And thankfully for me, I knew the person from before, both as a mentor and as a friend. So, you know, we had a good relationship. So I kind of felt a bit at ease to doing that. But what happened was, so I've now gone first block with one, second block with another. And then lo and behold, what happens is that after the second block, we find out, right, this one can't do the next block. So, but during that block there, it was almost, because of the relationship I did have with the person, I was able to kind of more take a senior role, but have a bit of support. And then we got to block 3. And there was 2 different tutors covering on block 3. So in one course, I've worked with 4 different tutors, but I've been the mainstay throughout. Now, what had happened was, obviously at the start of the course, just to kind of paint a bigger picture again, is half the group goes with one tutor, half the group goes with another tutor in terms of getting the support in between the qualification and the blocks, with the in-situ visits where we would come out and observe them, of course. But because the first tutor wasn't available anymore, and the second tutor that came in was from a different county, I was almost, you know, asked, can I pick up as many of these people as I can? And what was interesting, and this is where I kind of come back to it a little bit, is the style of delivering, I guess, it being a lottery, so to speak. I had gone out and obviously observed certain people, and I guess in some ways I can be quite straight to the point. My job is here to not to necessarily, my priority here is to help you become a better coach.
Of course.
Now, sometimes that might not be an enjoyable experience, but it's certainly one that's going to challenge you and might take you out your comfort zone. And my constant, I guess, the thing that's sort of forefront of my mind is, I need to keep you outside of your comfort zone for as long as possible, just outside it where you don't feel scared.
Yeah.
So you're almost always in touching distance to leave your toe in the water, basically. And in doing that, some people, it took well to it, some people didn't. So over time, it's interesting because I've done the first 2 blocks. And because obviously we've now established the second shoot was not going to be coming back, we've had to now start thinking, right, I'm going to be picking up some of these people. And I remember one particular learner comes across to me and says, you know, I'm quite apprehensive about you coming out to visit me now, yes. I was like, okay, tell me more. Like, well, you know, I'm interested to know more now, because that's the first time someone's actually come and said that to me. A lot of people have been, I've challenged a lot of people differently, but that's the first time someone's actually come and said to me, I'm a bit apprehensive. I said, okay, well, what's that all about then? Because when I've been speaking to everyone that you've kind of done a visit with, and you know, they've all kind of said that you've come along, and when you came along, you really just slated their session. I said, okay, interesting. And what was really funny about it was everyone else that I'd actually worked with was there when that was being said. So I was like, okay. But it was interesting because one person in particular stepped in and said, hold on a second, do you know what? I can tell you that, you know what you're describing is exactly how I felt. But I tell you this, within a couple of days, after I kind of got my head out my bottom and realized that he's here to help me, and actually look at the feedback he gave me, because the reality is he's got experience that we haven't. And we might not like being told what to do. And I think as coaches, generally, we don't like being told what to do because we want to feel like we know what we're doing. We're coaches, we've got egos, and that's how it works. But what was really interesting to hear on that particular day was every single one that I kind of worked with before said we all felt the same. And what they felt was, yes, you came and slated our session, but actually within a week of seeing you on that day, I got out of bed and I realized he's given me a lot of things to work on here. And now I'm a much better coach because I've actually addressed some of the things that I didn't even know existed. Now, after that, they've gone from liking or preferring another tutor to saying, we want him. So those people come in and even go back further than that. Some of the people that I've worked with on level ones who then maybe purposefully seeked me out to do the level two, which is a luck of the draw, because I've had other people for whatever one reason or another had to leave another course and join my course, and they're like, I wish I was on this course from the beginning. And I'm not sure there's other tutors who've had experiences like that as well. But it really is luck of the draw, and it's about, you can't really, because we don't really get to vet the tutor. We've got to pick the course that's available for us based on our circumstances. So it is a challenge in that respect. So I think finding the right tutor is difficult, which is why it becomes all the more important to, I guess, build your network of support outside of the classroom environment and the course environment. So where are you getting your support from? Who are you looking at for support? Have you started asking yourself certain questions around maybe what you want to learn and what you want to develop in yourself? Quite often, I'm sure you've seen it as well, when you finish a course and they give you an action plan, you go away and watch more experienced coaches. Yeah, but that's too vague. Yeah. What do I want to watch experienced coaches for? What am I looking for? Because for someone coming in at level one, or even finishing a level one, going into level two, or even finishing a level two, have they had enough experience to even start asking themselves, what does an experienced coach look like? Yeah. And experience that what? Because I come on to another experience of part of my story and my journey is that between 2016 and 2018, those 2 years, 18 months kind of period, I was on the grass for about 35 hours a week. Wow. And that was training and games. So about 35, probably 25 of those hours were literally just training sessions across 4 different environments. And why I highlight that, because when I finished my B license, the tutor had no idea what I was actually doing outside of that environment. So on his action plan for me, he said, go and do 50 hours and move over to your A license. I said, all right, fair enough. Little did we know, because he didn't actually understand the context that I was working in, or the context of all the environments working in, that was only 3.5 weeks for me. So I finished my B license, I've done my hours, I've got evidence of everything, I've done all of that. And then 6 months later, I've gone and started my A license. Yeah. No, it's crazy. I think that part is really key. So I think it is important for coaches, especially now with the way the pathway is going, and it has come from. Start really asking yourself questions. What do you want to become better at? Seek out different avenues to get that support. Don't just go and say, this person's been coaching for 10 years, so they must have experience. Yeah, but they've been coaching for 10 years, but they might be doing 1 hour a week for 10 years. Yeah. And they might only be working in one particular environment for 10 years. And then I say this all the time. Why do you think the Licensed Coaches Club came in 2011? Because there were so many coaches out there not keeping themselves updated or current with the stuff that's going on and refreshing their knowledge and doing a CPD. So the FA had to kind of bring something in to kind of mandate and oversee the process to make sure that the coaches out there are still trying to upskill themselves and renew their knowledge, if you like.
Yeah, 100%. The thing is, it goes back to internal motivations, because 2 things I was going to pick up on there. Number one is that when I done my degree, I done it based around the effects of CPD on grassroots coaches development. And one of the things which came out, it always sticks with me, although it couldn't have stuck with me that well because I've actually forgotten the author of the document. But there was something called the 70-20-10 model, and it's basically about how basically coaches taking information from courses in CPD. And what I was amazed to find out, well, I say I was amazed, but then I wasn't at the same time, that basically 10% is from the tutor, 20% is from the conversations, which obviously we know from attending courses and leading courses, the conversation is the thing which basically ends up running throughout the whole course pretty much. And then 70% of it is within their own environments. So there is that element, like you said, of just, you said you're just doing X amount of hours on the grass each week. Everyone always says it whenever you talk to coaches or managers or players, you say, no, how do you get better at becoming a coach? Experience it, go out there and do it, actually practically practicing it. And I think you said, if you get these external things which you're, learning and taking in, whether it's through other people, whether it's through online distance courses, that's going to help you be able to understand where you're at, and not just in terms of the qualification. Because the second point as well I was going to mention is, I always often talk about qualifications as job indicators versus ability indicators. Now, I know some people who don't even have their level ones, who actually their understanding is unbelievable. Their understanding of when to make decisions, when to challenge people, when to problem solve and all that, compared to some people who are really experienced within qualifications, but actually they, like you said, they've kind of just gone on to them to get them because they need them for their job.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. Then that's what it brings back to that initial piece around, right, what is the knowledge that you're trying to get? What are you trying to get better at? So I often, I say this to a lot of coaches, you can have all the qualifications, but if you don't understand how to implement it and actually practically be able to, demonstrate that, it doesn't mean a thing. Yeah. And you're right, there's loads of coaches out there who maybe not as qualified, but have a lot of knowledge. And I think the key thing within that is for coaches who are, this is always a debate that people have. People say, I want to go and get my B license, I want to go and get my A license. Right? Why?
Yeah.
Question is why? Why? What do you want it for? What do you need it for? And I get this all the time because obviously I've delivered a lot of level 2s in the past as well. And it's how long do you think I can turn on to my B license? Well, I put on the action plan. I don't think you should go on to B license until such and such time, get X, Y, Z done. And then within a couple of weeks, they're messaging me saying, oh, yes, could you write me a reference for the B license? Yeah, when you finish all of that, I can.
Yeah.
Because my thing is this, what do you even want it for? Now, if you've got no intentions of becoming a career coach, do you need a B license? Do you need an A license? In my opinion, no, you don't. Does it mean that you don't want to go? Does it mean that you can't then obtain the same depth and content of knowledge that you can get from the course? Yeah. So it might be right. Do you know what? I know that on the A license, they talk about X, Y, Z. I don't really want to go down the path and get an A license, but I'd love to know more about X, Y, Z. This is where you start now thinking, right, informal CPD, find potentially a mentor or more experienced coach that understands that element of things, and maybe you pick their brains on it to get your knowledge from. And it's definitely possible. It's a feasible thing for anyone in the industry really to kind of do that. But you need to know what you want to improve on and what you're looking for before you can find it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely, for me, one of the biggest things you could do is get yourself a mentor. And this doesn't have to be one, because I know certainly from my experiences, both working in and outside of academy football, we've got coach developers, you've got youth coach developers that come into the club and support you. But there's going to be people that you maybe don't directly work with, but you admire the way they work, or there's something about their work that you really think, oh, I'd love to do a bit of that in what I do, or I really like the way this person does that. Go and ask them, how did you get good at that? How did you get good at that? What is your thought process around that? How do you develop on that? And just have those conversations. And what my experience tells me is that when you actually ask these questions, people very often do give you answers.
Yeah.
You shouldn't, and I think for a lot of people, it can be quite a daunting thing. I can't go and ask him. Well, of course you can. How do you think he got the information?
Yeah.
He got it from someone, or she got it from someone. They asked someone, or they spoke to someone, or they watched something. They weren't born with that information. They had to pick it up from somewhere. So if you don't ask, you don't get. So I think it's very important that anyone listening to this, especially if a coach that's looking to become a career coach or someone looking to develop themselves, start asking, what are the areas that you want to develop in? It comes back to one of the points you made a few moments ago about this, the idea of experience, and it's the experience that counts, that 70% stuff. Yeah, the experience is great, but it only really counts if you start to reflect on it.
100%.
You've got to reflect on it. You've got to break it down and say, right, I've gone and done 50 hours in the past 2 weeks of coaching. What did I learn? What did I take away? Actually, you know, the best practice, go and document it. What did you pick up? Why was it good? What did you pick up? Why does it need to change? How is it going to help? And what do you want to gain from it? So I think having those steps is very key. That reflection process is the most important part for me. And I think you can have all the experience in the world, but if you're not reflecting on it, it is just experience and not knowledge.
Yeah.
So I think that's the key part.
Yeah, and as well, I'd say it's not understanding. Like, even like how I talk with players, and I say, you know, you might understand, or sure, you might know how to do something, but unless you understand why, where, when, you know, that isn't understanding. You know, you're not
100%.
Really learning it. You're just taking information in almost.
100%. That's where the comprehension part comes in. It's actually around reflecting on it. You're going through the process of pulling out the key parts that went well, pulling out the key parts that were from the potential areas for development. And just by going through that process, you're going to learn more. Now, the next step to that is to take what you've gone through in the reflection process and implement the changes, and then be able to rationalize and justify, not to yourself but to someone else, why you've done it that way. Because there's a saying that goes, if you teach someone something or you share information with someone, you get to learn it twice.
It's good.
Now, on that note, it's a thing where, right, if I'm going to share something with you, I need to be quite confident in what I'm saying. And if I'm now questioning my confidence in when I'm giving you some information, I'm thinking, do I know enough about this?
Yeah.
So I think that's a key part as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's brilliant. I think, like I said, again, it goes back to the understanding thing. I think with anything, whatever you put out there and you say or you do, listen, you can do whatever you want to do. You can say whatever you want to say. But as long as you have the understanding as to why you're doing it, even similar to what we said about the qualifications, you know, like I said, if someone does go on to get their B and then their A and then their pro, okay, fair enough. They've gone on to go and get it. But as long as they understand, like you said, why they're going to get it, you know, it might be, like I said, that job indication. It might be that actually, do you know what? They've also done university courses. They've also done all the CPDs under the sun. So there's literally nothing else left for them to do. And that's what they want to do. So I think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the understanding element and also as well, the reflection part of it. I think, like I said, that's key. I think with this whole discussion, really, it's the main thing is reflecting on understanding why you're taking a course and, you know, what you want to get out of the course. Like you said, sometimes you might not get along with tutors, and like you said, it's going to be luck of the draw, but it's understanding what can I get from that tutor. Yeah. So not I'm not going to get a good experience here. It's okay, well, what can I gain from this tutor? Is it their things from their experience? Is it even their characteristics? It's things such as that. I mean, I take away things like that rather than other stuff sometimes.
It makes me think back about my B license. You know, I remember on my B license up until I guess the night before my final assessment, I thought my tutor was useless. Honestly. But I realized with him, what it was is he was only interested in working with people that had a proactive approach. Right? So on my B license, we had 48 learners, including myself. Wow. And from the 48, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, obviously we broke up into 4 groups of 12, 4 different tutors plus a course director. So there was 5 tutors in total working across the group. And from the 48, only, if I'm not mistaken, I think 13 of us passed.
Wow.
13 of us passed. So that's, you know, there's less, it's just, well, just over 25%.
Yeah.
Which was below average at the time, but the average wasn't that great either, if I'm honest. And I remember my tutor, 3 of us in my 12 passed, which left 10 in the other groups. But then funnily enough, those 10 were actually only from the other 2 groups because one tutor failed all 12 of his learners. Now, in my head, I'm thinking to myself, well,
can all 12
that's not. Well, the thing is, if you've had 12 learners in your group and all of them have failed, what does that say about you as a tutor?
Yeah.
Never mind whether they've been good enough or not. Why have they not been good enough? And why have they not been good enough to the point where they can actually just enough for them to actually get qualified and have an action plan which substantiates them for having to do maybe an extensive process of development between now and the next qualification? You've got to fail all 12. Is that a reflection on them or you? But then coming back to my point, sorry, is that with my tutor, what I realised that, do you know what? Everyone in my group was kind of confused, bar two guys going into the final day. But then I thought, you know what? Let me just give him a call, because I don't actually understand what they're looking for. Like I said before, with the old style, it was very much, you need to do what your tutor wants to see.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, I'm not going to risk this. I've come all this way to do this course, and I'm now at the final day, but I don't actually understand what he wants me to do. And I felt quite confident and competent around the knowledge I had and my ability to deliver, but I didn't know what he wanted to see. So I just gave him a call and I just clarified a few things. And after having that conversation, I realized he gave me so much clarity, but it took me having to reach out to him to get the clarity, rather than him giving the clarity through the delivery of the course. So I think it comes back to the top of the conversation. We're talking about luck of the draw, lottery with the tutors. And coming back to this part now, we're saying it's about being proactive and having that understanding of, right, what do I need to improve on? What do I want to develop on? Who can I go to that's going to be able to help me, give me some answers to these problems? So I think that's a key part of the process as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think, again, point you mentioned on there, which again kind of, you know, sums it all up really, is that, you know, in having these courses and having it actually being led by someone as opposed to going off and doing your own self-development. Yes, it's important. And yes, like we said, you need that alongside or to assist in what you're learning and what you're doing. But being able to have that interaction. And that was why I was so surprised with that 70-20-10 model, because, you know, don't get me wrong, obviously there's probably been a lot of research gone into it, but I do agree. I think just through having those conversations, and like you mentioned there, you know, literally it's taking you to pick up the phone, give them a call, and actually it's made it a lot clearer. Now, maybe that's what's hindering a lot of people. You know, they're getting that 10% from the tutor because, like you said, they're coming away confused. They're not really understanding what they want to get out of it. They just want the qualification, a bit of paper. So they're just thinking, oh, well, I think I get what they're saying, but you know what? I won't go and approach them. I won't ask them. I'll just do basically what they've done previously. And then it comes down to it, and that's not what they've done. That's their interpretation of what they've done. So I think, you know, it's, like you said, I think it's being confident enough. And it's not even just confident enough. It's just, like you said, just being able to understand what you want to do and how you're going to get that. If it means picking up the phone call to somebody who's a tutor, do that. If it means maybe picking up a call to somebody who's previously been on a B course.
This is where it becomes difficult. This is where it becomes difficult, David. You could pick up the phone to call me as a tutor, but I'm not the one assessing you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If I'm not the one assessing you, I can give you things based on my perspective in terms of what I deem as this, and this. But if you rock up to a tutor, as an example, as a coach, I'm quite, I don't get too heavily involved in terms of directing the players. A lot of my coaching is done through questioning and guided discovery. If you go down, you're being assessed by a tutor who doesn't have a similar kind of ethos, mate, you're buggered. You're buggered. Like, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. He's going to be thinking, well, why aren't you stepping in yet? And it's not necessarily, and this is the challenge with qualifications, even though they've changed the pathway a little bit, it's still left open to interpretation of the tutor. Yeah. So I think you've got, if you know, advice to anyone that goes on any courses, find out what your tutor wants to see. Find out what your tutor's thinking. What's their perspective? And if their perspective is different to yours, that's fine. But if you understand their perspective, you know where they're coming from and where you're coming from, and you can try and bridge those gaps and connect the dots in between it, so that they can see where you're coming from without feeling like you haven't understood their thing. Yeah. It's almost taking what they said, understand it, and then challenge it with this. Rationalize why you're not going to do it the way that they've asked or suggested. I'm not going to do it because actually you've told me to do it this way, and that's fantastic. I do agree with it. However, I'm working with a group of under 12s on a Friday night after 5 long days of exams. It's not going to work tonight. So I've decided to go with this instead because my experience shows me X, Y, Z. Bridge the gap, connect the understanding.
Yeah, no, brilliant. I think it's fantastic advice. And I think, again, I think it's an interesting topic, reason why I wanted to discuss it. I think mixed in with the fact that obviously we're in lockdown, mixed in with the fact that I know the FA, again, like you said, are changing the courses again. And I don't know if you're aware, you've probably seen as well, that they're also coming out with these online tutors now and, you know, the social coordinators, mentors as well.
Yeah, so I think from what's happening, yeah, I think what's happened really is that because obviously the pandemics, you know, this cost them a lot of money. They lost a lot through the pandemic, and they've obviously decided to revamp the courses, move the level 1 online. The level 2 is going for a restructure as well, and I would presume that the other 2 courses, in terms of your B license and A license, probably going to have some sort of revamp as well, in line with the new strategy for the FA. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next, I guess, 4 or 5 years with the coach education pathway. How much of it will be actually face to face? Yeah,
it's interesting. I think someone said the other day that, you know, if they do totally revamp the stuff altogether, you may not even come into face to face contact with a tutor until you're almost.
Until you do practical,
yeah.
It'd be crazy. I'm not sure how that will work, but you can't. One thing you can't deny is the importance of a face to face element to the courses. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets factored in. I know that speaking to a couple of people I know that have been on their A license within the last 12 months, all of their blocks have literally been over Zoom.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They haven't had any face-to-face contact at all, but they're now 3-4 blocks into their A license. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in regards to that.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, listen, I think, like I say, it's an interesting topic of conversation. And I think, again, one of the reasons I want to pick up on it is because, again, I know your background within tutoring as well. So I thought it'd be really interesting to try and get your side of it. But yeah, some fantastic insight. I'd invite anybody who's obviously watching, listening to this, to put in the comments below your thoughts and your opinions. You know, how do you learn? Do you learn through face-to-face courses, the tutors? What are your relationships like when you build with these tutors? Or do you do online CPD, especially in this day and age? So yeah, so welcome any comments in the comments below, and let us know your thoughts. So for this next section, we've got the 5-a-side team, okay? And each week what I do is I give the guest coach a little bit of a challenge around picking a 5-a-side team based on a certain type of scenario or factor. And this week what I've gone with is a 5-a-side team of players who are currently still playing, who would make a top coach or a top manager, and why as well. So yes, over to you. What's your 5-a-side team that could become top managers and coaches?
I think what first thing to kind of, it's definitely a difficult one. It's something I've been thinking about. I think I'm still kind of a bit undecided on some of them, but I think it's a couple key parts here, to be fair, is looking at, firstly, the difference between a coach and a manager.
Yeah.
Very important. You know, I know certainly growing up, I've always said, you know, I want to be a manager, I'm not sure if I do. I think I just prefer being a coach because it's a different type of responsibility. And in some ways, yes, skill sets are a bit transferable and alike, but they're also very different as well. So I think, you know, first on the list is maybe looking at some of the characteristics and then maybe trying to highlight some of the players who've maybe got those. Obviously, you want to be someone that is influential. I think that's a definite thing. And doesn't, you know, being influential doesn't mean you have to be a loud mouth or be out in front of everyone. But no, you have an impact on, I guess, different people for different reasons. And it's almost like you're the glue to the teams in some ways. Yeah. So I think that is probably one of the characteristics I'll probably look out for. But I guess, you know, if I had to pick 5, and let me just understand this correctly, it's 5 people that are still playing.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about some that are still playing, but I realised actually a couple of these have just retired quite recently.
A big overhaul recently.
100%. So I think one of them definitely for me would have to be, I think, Kevin De Bruyne. Both from a tactical standpoint, obviously he's fantastic, but you can also see he's also the cog that keeps Man City ticking. When he's not in the team, you really see the difference. I think that's one thing. Another one who's definitely got the potential, you know, based on what you see now, Marcus Rashford. If there's a leader in any of us, there he is. You know what I mean? He's leading by example, and I think, you know, he's using his platform to great benefit. You know, just nationally. Do you know what I mean? Around across the nation altogether. So I think that's another one I'd probably definitely have in that team there. But then, you know, obviously you said it's a 5-a-side team, so I'm starting to think, right, is there any goalkeepers out there that have kind of got an impact and that I would kind of bring into that? And I think he's maybe not at his best, but I think probably one of them would have to be. I'd have to throw in David De Gea. Okay. Because David De Gea, because he in the period between, I guess, Ferguson leaving, we had Van Gaal, you know, they had Mourinho. the one probably name on the list, the team sheet that was probably guaranteed throughout all of that was David De Gea.
Yeah.
Because throughout all of that, he was arguably the best in the world, even when the rest of the team were nowhere near that. So I guess in terms of, again, leading by example, I probably have to throw him in as probably a goalkeeper. Two more. So I've got David De Gea, Kevin De Bruyne. You've got Marcus Rashford in there. And I think every team probably needs a bit of a, maybe from a slightly different perspective. Maybe need a bit of a joker, a bit of a I guess somebody who has to laugh at the team. So I think I'm trying to think, who would I put in there? Do you know what? It's interesting. I think I would probably put, it's probably going to sound a bit biased now because it's a third one from the club, but I think I'd actually put Paul Pogba in there.
Yeah, fair point.
I'd probably put Paul Pogba in there because despite all the negative attention that he gets, you never really get the feel that the club or the players at the club or even the manager to an extent are really unhappy with him.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which then makes me question, right, from a psychological standpoint, he must be quite strong mentally to deal with all the pressure and be under pressure constantly. Especially being someone who's at one point the most expensive player in the world, with a lot of criticism, up and down, or around the world, really, around the way he plays. More specifically with a gentleman called Graham Souness, but that's a separate discussion. Do you know what I mean? So I think those three, so David De Gea, Rashford, Pogba, Kevin De Bruyne, and then I think finally, I probably have to go for Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Cristiano Ronaldo, I probably have to put him in there because, the guy's work ethic is just different class. Even now at age of 36, we talk about Zlatan being a 40, coming up to 40 and whatnot and doing the things that he's doing. But I think Cristiano Ronaldo is a different beast because, as good as Zlatan is and as amazing as he's done, he did go to the LA Galaxy for a couple of seasons. He did play a lot of his football in Paris with the PSG, which arguably is not as strong as league as first of all Premier League, then La Liga, and then obviously now it's Serie A. You're almost expecting PSG to win it regardless of what's happening. So he had a few years where he maybe made his career longer because of those seasons with PSG and then at the LA Galaxy. So, but obviously he's come back and he's still as strong as ever. But I think Cristiano Ronaldo, in the work ethic and the discipline that he's demonstrated at the top level, and actually may not only at the top level, but being, in my opinion, the best player of all time. Yeah. And there's often a debate who's better, Ronaldo or Messi. I think one of the things you can't deny is probably, if anything, Messi's probably more naturally gifted. Yeah. Whereas Cristiano, as talented as he is, he's probably had to work a lot harder to get there, in my opinion. And I'm sure you probably find a lot of people probably agree with that. So I think for 5 players, off the top of my head, probably those 5 would be David De Gea. 5. Yeah, David De Gea with Kevin De Bruyne, Paul Pogba, and then you got Rashford and Ronaldo.
Nice. No, really strong team. And it's interesting because, again, this is a bit of fun, but it's also, again, kind of exactly what you mentioned. Understanding as to why I think people are in certain teams, and like you said there, literally each one you've broken down and it's all laid back to one certain thing. Their characteristics, regardless of, obviously Kevin De Bruyne, he's tactical and he's technical elements, of course, everyone's in awe of that. But like you just said, all these personal characteristics. And I think when you look back on coaches and managers, and I know that through my time of doing mentoring to other coaches, that's what I look at. That's what I take away from the things, what environments are they setting through their own characteristics. Obviously, we spoke in the last discussion about things you'll learn from courses, but these are things which, I was going to say happen naturally, but they're things which grow up with you. You blossom into an individual. You have your own personality traits. You have your own characteristics. Yes, some might be influenced by social settings and, things you may see or take on board. But yeah, really, really strong team. I think it's a brilliant team there. And like I said, some specific individuals there, which each have different traits, which I think are all important and crucial to coaches and managers. So yeah, no, fantastic side. Again, anybody in the comments, make sure you comment below. Let us know your thoughts on the Ashes team. Is there anybody that you would change, or anybody that you think who will make it to the top, and maybe even mention as well which teams that they might end up going to manage? I know a lot of people probably hope that Ronaldo goes back to Man United, or maybe not. Don't want to ruin his legacy, but yeah, share your thoughts and your opinions. But yeah, great team, yes, I really like it. This week on the Daily Coaching Football Show, I am joined by a very special guest, okay? Current defender at Bristol Rovers, Mark Little. Now, Mark's played in over 400 games in the EFL, playing for clubs such as Wolves, Bristol City, Bristol Rovers, Peterborough. It's a pleasure to have you with me today. I think one of the things which you always look forward to as a kid is that either that first pair of boots you get or the first shirt that you get. Can you remember what that was for you?
I do remember a pair of boots that I've actually forgot my boots once before a school game. So I said rang my mum, you need to go and buy me another pair of boots real quick. And she came back and they were 3 sizes too big. I remember those more validly than any other things. But I was given a Aston Villa shirt first. That was my first jersey, which led me to be an Aston Villa fan for about 5 minutes. Did
you have a particular, say, hero, but somebody who inspired you when you was coming up?
For this reason, well, Ashley Cole was one, because again, I felt he was a bit fashionable. I'd say the first one that went into like the fashionable kind of zone. I feel I play similar to him, just like the absolute poor man. Do you know what I mean? Not saying I'm anywhere near his level, but that obviously, how to explain, I played more like Ashley Cole than I would Gary Neville. Yeah. But I was fascinated by the class of '92, like every one of them. Like for every player in that class, plus the manager. If I was ever looking at managing, they all had attributes that, for me, if they were the best at them, like they were the. If any footballer, they could find someone in that team to kind of model themselves on. I believe, and that's where. So I kind of looked at a group rather than one particular player. If you was to kind of look overall so far, would there be sort of a standout moment or a highlighted moment which for you, you've kind of almost been like, pinching your skin and gone, wow, I can't believe this, whether it was, winning something or whether it was just a moment? My dream was kind of to win. I believe winning a league is optimal, because you can win a cup through a bit of momentum and a bit of, I hate using the word because you make your own luck, but a bit of luck. Yeah. You can't win a league, luckily. You have to go and earn that. There's a shadow of a doubt for the amount of games you have to go. So I always thought that would be the thing. But when I won the league with City, we'd already smashed it. Like we had like 5 or 6 games to go. So the climax kind of went a little bit. So a playoff win is huge, absolutely huge, because not only are you helping the club, helping the fans, doing all that sort of stuff, getting the club to you've achieved what you set out at the start of the season. So you had a full year of achieving something. Usually it would affect my personal family because there's a pay rise and that sort of stuff. So again, a couple of promotions that I've had have been, 3 promotions that I've had is massive for my family. But then going back to where you said, like, the moment where you pinch yourself is probably when I scored at Wembley. So when I scored in the JPT final, that was ridiculous, because I would have never, as we go back to the start, like I said, I'm a right back. So it's not, I would never ever have dreamed to be, all my head would have been, right, I'm going to play like Ashley Cole one day and get it, like you say, tackle like Ashley Cole. I would have never been, I'm Thierry Henry nodding one in at the back stick. Like, it never ever be that. So when it happened, it was like, I can't believe I've just done that. That's absolutely crazy. And I like checked the linesman a couple of times to make sure it was. And, check my mates were coming to celebrate and not getting back in shape for an offside or anything like that. But yeah, that happened and it got confirmed, and that was it. And then, so then we won the game, we've won the cup, I've scored, and then when I'm doing the interview, they've then announced that I was man of the match as well. And then I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is absolutely crazy. So that was probably the standout moment of, if you had to pick one moment, it was probably that day at Wembley was the most memorable one. So,
if you hadn't have become a footballer, what other career path do you see yourself potentially going down?
Well, like before I knew I was going to play football, the only thing I knew really is watching. My dad was the mechanic, so I used to watch him, and he warned me against it. And I said, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to go and do my mechanics at college or whatever." He's like, "No, you're not. Like, not a chance." It was, it's a hard job, mate. It's like it's
a graft as well. A lot of hours.
It's a graft, mate, and it's not like he worked in a Mercedes garage and everything was spotless and they all have their overalls on and gloves. My old man was literally lay on his back in the rain and all that sort of stuff. It was hot, proper graft. So, but that was all I knew. I didn't know anything else. I wasn't very academic, so I didn't think I was going to go to law school or anything like that. It would have been a manual job. It would have been a manual job. But then now, after football, I've really, really enjoyed business now. Like, it fascinates me, and I can relate to football now, whether that, like any sort of business, running huge businesses or even small businesses, how that side of things work. It fascinates me. So I think what would have happened is I would have tried a manual job and then ended up starting my own business, I think, as I got a bit older.
If you could choose one, so again, if you were sort of in charge of obviously now things have moved on, but we'll call it an Orcs lead. If you was in charge of the Orcs lead,
the playlist,
what would you choose?
Any sort of rap music where, and I know it doesn't make any sense, but it does for me, where a lot of rap music, they're rapping about how they get stuff done, how they hustle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that gets me going. Do you know what I mean? Meek Mill, like, just obviously he's talking about stuff that I don't understand. I am not in the zone of gangster, shoot me this and steal this car and drug dealing. That ain't me. But the way they speak about it gets me going, and that's what I listen to. But if I am in charge of the Orcs lead or playlist, I need to recognise there's another 11 players in this room. So you have to mix it up. I've done it before, so you have to mix it up. There's usually the goalkeepers, they'll listen to heavy metal, but they can't be listening to R&B soul when you've got a goalkeeper that listens to heavy metal. So you have to mix it. I actually got one of my DJ friends to make a playlist for Wembley. I think it was Peterborough when I won the JPT at Wembley. I actually pretty much hired someone to make a good playlist. It's important, mate. Anything that gets you going.
When I ask this question, I sometimes think to myself that a lot of people will answer it based just on talent or ability alone. But I think kind of as this conversation's gone along, we've spoken a lot about personal characteristics and traits and sort of those individual things. So a mixture of all of that, really. If and again, you have mentioned, to be fair, that you played some small-sided games at training and things like that. If you had to pick your ultimate five-a-side team of players that you played with, who would be on that side for you and why?
I'll name my players, but they're not those five-a-side players might not get into my best 11. Do you see what I mean? So
100%.
I play with Arun Otsuma at the moment. Ozzy, he's unbelievable. In small areas, this kid's unbelievable. So he'd be first on the team sheet. I used to play with Mark Davis, which was another similar build type of guy when I was really young. Again, in five-a-side, he'd get in my starting 11 as well, by the way. He's unbelievable. So there's two. I played myself because I'd sit at the back and make sure no one lost. Am I allowed to pick myself, yeah?
Yeah, of course.
Who else? Do you know what I put in there? I put Kyle Henry in there. He was a captain, an absolute leader. Not liked by many because of how focused he was. He was like a Roy Keane type of character. Like, you liked him because of the presence that he brought. So I'd stick the governor in the middle. Then I played with Paul Ince, he'd be the other person to put him on, but I don't think that counted that much. I only played a couple of reserve games with him, so I'm not going to put him in. Myself, Ozzy, Sparky, Mark Davis, Kyle Henry. Then I need a goal scorer. Then I'll put Dwight Gale up front.
Okay.
because Gailey had a knack of being in the right place at the right time all the time. Like he wouldn't be doing anything fancy. He wouldn't be doing anything. He's similar to Tammy Abraham. Tammy was very similar, but I'm going to go with Gailey only because Tammy's attributes in 11v11 is the fact that he can do all the other stuff, but I think it highlights Gailey's five-a-side skills. So how many have we got there? Me, three governors. Yeah, that's my team. That's my team there. That's my goal scorer.
So for this week's tweet of the week, the tweet is, the more sport you can play from a younger age, the better. Now, when this first came round and I saw this tweet, it kind of put me in two minds, really. Number one, my sort of FA head was like, yes, do that. You know, brilliant. You want to try and play as many sports as you can because you're thinking about your ABCs. You're thinking about, learning and understanding from potentially different coaches. But then I saw a comment which was underneath and it said something about specialization versus generalization. And it made me think about, I didn't even go into football, playing football until I think I was 13. I think that was the first time I played in an actual grassroots game, if you want to call it that. Whereas nowadays, you're seeing people come into football from like the age of 6. Now, that person who's age 6, I know it's obviously in different formats throughout the journey, but they're playing in probably over 1,000 competitive small-sided games before they even get to the age of 13. So it's a tough thing to think about. What's your thoughts when you hear something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a good topic, to be honest. It's a very interesting one. I think specialization versus generalization. The research will tell you that at a younger age, there's obviously this argument for early specialization. I think specialization is great, but the problem you have with that is that person is now going to grow up and they're probably going to limit their experience, especially as a child. Certainly as they get older, if all they know, and we see it all the time, in academy football as an example, where very few people actually then going on to make it with pros. I think the stats are crazy. I don't know the exact numbers, so don't quote me, but the amount of players that drop out of the game at 18 and never step back into a football environment is incredible. Crazy. I know it's a crazy stat, and like I said, I don't know the figures off the top of my head, but and unfortunately, we've even had stories recently, like, for instance, the young lad at Man City, he took his life because of the fact that, he thought he was, odds on to maybe become a pro at Man City, and when it didn't work out, these sorts of things happen. So they kind of put all their eggs in one basket. So I think there's definitely an argument to say that, from that perspective, specialization probably isn't the best thing. And a range of experience is obviously more beneficial. But then if you look at the amount of athletes that have come through in footballers in particular, that have maybe come from different sports or have gone through their young youth development phase stage, 12 to 16, playing multiple sports, and then having to come to 16 when they're now deciding which country or which sport they're going to specialize in. They've gone with football, but actually they've actually got a choice because they're actually performing highly well at both sports, or three even. Yeah. So there's an argument to say that they can lend themselves to one another. I think especially depending on the type of sport, not just technically, but not just physically, the components and the things they can develop, but from a tactical standpoint, if you've got someone who maybe played another invasion game, there's loads of things they can develop from that and then bring that across to the football side of things, or vice versa. So I guess to start with, I think you should definitely give them a lot of different experience, in my opinion. I'm conscious, obviously, that, again, the physical attributes that they can develop by playing in different kind of sports and different, not sports specifically, but just doing different types of activities from a young age. I know for me, for instance, with my eldest, I was very conscious about having her play loads of different sports and try out loads of different activities, just so she can, even if in the long term, maybe I would love for her to be involved in football, but ultimately I wanted to get a range of different experiences so that she can learn things from different activities and different sports, and I guess become a more well-rounded individual. I think what we need to remember is that as much as we want to help players become professional footballers and whatnot, what we're really working is with a person.
Yeah.
And it's the person that becomes the professional footballer in the first place. So if we can help share and develop those experiences of the person, and, you know, I think certainly from my experience, long term, that's definitely something that's going to start to put them in good stead in terms of, I guess, securing any environment. Because, like I said, there's so many kids that are there, age 5, 6, 7, gone pre-academy, 8, 9, foundation phase, youth development phase, professional development phase, and all of a sudden it gets to 16. You either ain't got a scholar, or you get your scholarship 2 years in, you might get a third year scholar, and then all of a sudden it's, nah, we're not taking you on. You're out the game. Now, if you've been doing that your whole life, what else do you know? So I guess there's that element of it, and then obviously for a lot of parents and a lot of children, rather, they're being put under pressure by their parents, because maybe some of the parents are trying to live their own dreams through the child. So there's so many different pressures, but for me, I think it's definitely not specialization, which is key at this stage. I think maybe the type of training might be something to consider, but I think in terms of specializing in a sport or an activity per se, I probably would steer away from that to start with, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that last point you made was brilliant about, sort of in terms of the type of training, because I agree with you. I think, like you mentioned earlier on about invasion type games, a lot of the time, especially with the younger age groups as well. I mean, work with 5, 6, 7-year-olds. They love things like tag and, taking bibs and stuff like that. And all of that is, again, not coincidentally, but you're actually teaching them the game of football anyway, because you're teaching them to attack, you're teaching them to defend, you're teaching them to move their body, you're thinking about when to change speed, when to change direction, adding in competitive elements to it. And I think, like you mentioned there, it's maybe not generalizing them not specializing them in one particular sport, but like you said, maybe generalizing them within opportunities to be able to be exposed to, like you said, different types of training, and also as well, I think different types of coaches. I think that, again, just like how we spoke about learning things from tutors, I know that, like, I'm under no illusion that when I work with a player, they've worked with thousands of coaches, and they're probably not going to remember me. And if they do remember me, it's probably not going to be for something like, tactical, which I've taught them. It's probably going to be something, either a session I've put on. It's going to be the way that I spoke. It's going to be the way that I built a relationship with them. So I think there's all these other factors, characteristics, traits that can be learned from that big exposure almost.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think one thing that kind of stands out for me there is, it's coming back to the bit we talked about earlier, is that they can learn all these different things from these different sports, and having, you talk about coincidence, and you teach them attacking and defending, and I think this is the bit where it becomes a fascinating topic for me, is how much of that is conscious versus what's unconscious.
Yeah. And
instinctive. So I think it comes back to that piece earlier, and I've had this conversation with a range of coaches and psychologists and whatnot, and neuroscientists even in the past few weeks, around how important is it that if the athletes, no matter what they're doing, they're aware of what they're doing. Are they aware, actually, yeah, we're not playing football, we're playing tag, or we're playing some sort of invasion game here, or it might be, a run out. So you've got your base, I've got my base, I'm protecting it. So I am attacking and defending in that respect. But at what stage do I guess, comprehend that that's what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Have I actually formulated a process and actually implemented a process to say, actually, oh, wait, I'm actually defending here. There's a strategy behind it.
Yeah.
There's a time when I'm going to go, and now we're branching to different things. I'm now talking about pressing and dropping off, but how much attention is being paid to that? So I think there's that argument as well, and that discussion to be had as well, about what awareness is being brought to what area. Is there any awareness being brought to anything that's being done, or are they just going through the motions, and we're now going to hope that because they've played stuck in the mud, or because they've played a game of tag, that they're just going to become good at understanding tactical elements, if that makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. And it was a little bit off topic, but again, something you picked up on there, which just made me think about this. Now, I have a big debate with coaches sometimes, and I love coaching 5 to 11-year-olds. Like, for me, forget about the 18s. Like, I don't want to coach older people. I like coaching the younger ones, because I really like to set the foundations within, introducing them and getting them to fall in love with the game. But what's interesting is that a lot of the time, when you get newly qualified coaches, or coaches who are just starting out within their journey, let's be honest, typically they get thrown in with the youngest age groups, and straight away it's the ones who are more experienced who obviously go with the older age groups. Now, I've had debates with coaches on so many occasions that should it not be almost, and I'm not saying it should be the other way around, but could it be the other way around? So then you're getting the more experienced and more knowledgeable coaches. Like you said there, coincidence versus unconsciousness, you know, actually these coaches are doing things on purpose, and they're going to do it and set it up in a way, design the session in a way that actually the child is going to become conscious of that.
Yeah.
Almost not being reinforced, but helping them along.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And again, it's another fantastic topic of discussion, because I think one thing that should be highlighted there, and I don't think it should be flipped on its head. I don't think it should be the way it is either. What I think it should be, and I think this is the way the game will go, and certainly if you look at the coach education pathway and what we touched on earlier, and the way it is one of the benefits I do see of the current pathway, or at least as it is now before it gets revamped in the near future, is that it will certainly breed more specialist coaches, in my opinion. I think you're going to start to see more coaches who are better suited and actually well-versed in different areas. So for me personally, you talked there about you working with 5-11s. I don't mind working with 5-11s, but I would consider myself more of a specialist 14s to 21s.
Yeah.
Because that's where most of my experience has been. And you talked there about, you know, being thrown in at younger ages. Personally, whether by circumstance or not, when I first came into coaching, I was working with 14s. Okay. I was working with under 14s from the beginning, and I've kind of just always stayed in and around that. Most of my experience has been with 16s to 19s, working predominantly with college and university players, or working with professional development phase players at clubs. Yeah. So I think the point that you make is a very, very important one, in that where should coaches begin their journey? I think coaches should begin their journey at an age group that they see themselves wanting to work at. Good point. So if I want to work in the pro game, leave youth football behind, go and get some experience. Even if it is at grassroots, working with senior players, you've got to try and get to the environment closest to the one that you want to end up in, so that you can start to prepare yourself for that. And I think that way, you become a bit more of a specialist rather than a jack of all trades and a master of none. So I think that's one of the things I certainly would say for any coaches coming into it. Oh, well, I've got to work with the under-9s because that's where they've put me. Well, go somewhere else then. Yeah. You're never going to... You can turn on every single corner, and it's not going to be one. There's probably going to be about 10 clubs on each corner. So you've got a hell of a lot of teams that you can go to, and trust me, 99 out of 100 clubs will be grabbing your hands off as a volunteer. Yeah. Which most of the people in grassroots football are working as anyway. And then you get the other few people who maybe not working as volunteers, and they're working in an age group or working with a set of players that they're maybe not too passionate about working with. So they might want to work with 15s, but because they're getting paid £10 an hour or whatever it might be to work with the 10s, they're just going to do that until something else better comes along. But then for me, those people aren't really career coaches. If you really want to become a career coach, you've got to try and pick an environment that's going to best suit you for the way that you want to go and the way that you want to develop. But yeah, I guess, for me, it's about finding the right environment for you, where you want to end up. Yeah. No,
I think it's important. And I think that will definitely help within that sort of, that sort of tweet which came out in terms of, should people play all these different sports? Well, actually, if you get the right coaches in the right environments, and say you get them, but like you said, they go into those environments because they want to be within those environments and they understand why they're in those environments, then, there's the opportunity.
Think about it this way, Dave. How many times have you worked with a player, and especially at that age, 5 to 11s, because it's probably more common there than any other age, that doesn't actually want to be there?
100%. Yeah.
How much do you get out of them?
Yeah.
There's a limit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's a limit. And if how many times with that sort of age where you say the player doesn't even want to play football, he's there because the parent has dropped him off so they can go do their shopping. Now, obviously, you're probably not going to get that in an elite setting where it's like academy based or anything like that. But it's so common. So why not just put them in something that they're actually passionate about? Now, Don't get me wrong. As a parent, it's obviously a challenge sometimes because you might get a child who's just difficult for whatever reason or hasn't quite found out what their passion is or what they want to be involved in. So that's why the whole generalization stuff comes from. Try different things with them. Let them try them until they find something they're passionate about. But if they're clearly not passionate about something, as a coach, working with 5 to 11s, people hear it all the time, make them fall in love with the game. Yeah, but you're going to fall in love with the game because there's something about the game that attracts you.
Yeah.
It's the same as a relationship. There's going to be something about that relationship that attracts you. It's the same with, it's no difference. There's only so long that you can stand someone that you're not attracted to. There's only so long that you can play a game that you don't want to play. It's going to have an expiry date on it. So I think it's important to find something that they're passionate about. And if they're at that age more specifically, give them an opportunity to, I guess, play in the position that they want to play potentially, but expose them to some of the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I think, like you mentioned, I think at the start, it goes back to the person rather than the player. Because again, a lot of the time, you know, people will go as well. Again, that's from a coaching aspect, but sometimes from a parent aspect, you know, they'll take children to things which their friends are going to because it's that social element. And again, like you said, they're actually the only reason why they're there is because of the social side of things, not the actual football side. So,
and I think there's nothing wrong with that either. If they want to be there because their friends are there, fair play. Yeah. Fair play. The amount of kids I've come across in the past, in my experience, I don't want to be there because they're playing football, but they're there because actually Jerome, Tyrese, and John are here.
Yeah.
I just want to play around them. And it might be in some cases that the person, I'm sure you've seen this one as well, where the person that's actually the glue to the team is probably sometimes the worst player in the team.
Yeah.
But they're the one that everyone loves. And that keeps everyone together and keeps everyone there. Do you know what I mean? So, again, key thing, come back to the person rather than the player.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic point. And again, I think it's a really important discussion in terms of like, you know, there is so much accessibility to sports now, but what is it? Do they specialise or do they generalise or do you get a mix between the two? But like you said, I think really important to go back to the person. So yeah, again, any comments on this, make sure that you put them in the comments below. Let us know what you think and maybe through some of your own experiences as well. What have you faced along your journey? But fantastic insight. So for this week's Coaches Challenge, so every week I set the coach who's with us a challenge to think about a specific type of session with a specific type of outcome so that obviously people listen and watching, they can make it relevant, either based if they have the similar type of players or maybe if they can change some of the ideas just to use as template of the session as well. So this week's Coaches Challenge is I've asked Coach Yas to design one part of a session which is suitable for a youth development team, okay, mainly at a lower ability level, but thinking about how they can develop their performances on the ball and becoming comfortable and confident on the ball or when in possession within a team as well. So Yas, over to you. What have you got down for us?
Yes, I mean, it's quite simple, really. I'm not one for, I guess, a lot of equipment. I just kind of stick with balls, bibs and cones, really. Nice. So first practice would be, it's one that's quite flexible and adaptable. What I find with a lot of my practices, I kind of create them in a way where they are multifunctional and very dynamic. And one thing that's probably always present is there is an element of transition because I'm really conscious and, within my own coaching philosophy, I want my players to really have a deeper understanding of awareness around what's going on and the impact of potential poor or good decisions. So I guess I use a framework of what you would consider as a traditional rondo. Again, because of the element of transition, there's always going to be a directional element to it. So essentially I have 6 cones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's almost 2 boxes alongside each other. Now, there'll be a player between each pair of cones. So you'll have 6 players on the outside, if you've got the numbers, of course. And then you'll have 2 players operating in the middle, one as like I said, in possession, one out of possession. All the balls will start down one end. And the objective is quite simple. The end that the balls start on, they have to move all the balls from one end to the other end, obviously one at a time. Now, the passes can only be played if they pass a set of cones. So if you notice, you've got 2 cones here, 2 cones here, 2 cones here with a player in between. So the players on the sides of the practice, they can't play to each other because obviously there's no way of them playing to each other without it going through 2 cones. And the player in the middle, all they'd have to do is, there's 2 ways in which they can score. So there'll be a time limit on it. You can set it depending on, I guess, the ability of the players and how much you want to challenge them. Again, you can change the area size. Generally, I tend to use maybe but a 6 to 8 yard grid doubled up. So there'll be 6 to 8 yard box here, a 6 to 8 yard box there. So the length of the practice might be, let's say, 12 12 yards, and the width of the practice might be 8 yards. And basically, all that happened, like I said, they've got to move the ball from this end to that end. Player in the middle, there's 2 ways to score. You can get 1 point for every, and this is the condition of the practice. Every attack that's complete must involve the central player.
Okay.
So the ball comes in from the outside into the central player, and it must involve them before it can go out to the other end. So it's really about building that player in the middle around there. First of all, their ability to shield and manipulate the ball and I guess keep onto it in tight areas, but recognizing when to kind of drop in and drop out so you can work. It gives lots of, I guess, freedom and opportunities to work on their movements. But also the key part here is, like I said, they've got to be involved in it, but they don't necessarily have to be the one to play the final pass. Now, to get more out of them, hopefully what we'll do is if they're the one on the ball and they've been able to play to someone else who then finishes the final ball, they only get a point. However, if they're the ones that are able to receive at any point in the build-up and then finish the attack, so to speak, they get 3. Now, one of the key things I've always kind of do within my practices is always conscious that if I'm working in possession, I need to make sure my out of possession is really competitive and vice versa. So in order for that to happen, what will happen here is if the out of possession player is successful in I guess, gaining possession, and this is the key part because I don't want a defender that's just going to kick the ball away. I want them to maintain possession and retain possession because I want them to get in the habit of, right, we're going to be on a transition. So the key part for me is here. There's 2 ways for them to score. If they get possession, whichever half of the grid they're in, the players round the outside of that half, which will be 3, plus the one that's already in the grid with them potentially, those players can come in and win the ball off that player. But if they don't win it within 3 seconds, that defender gets a point. Right? Now, if that defender is successful in maintaining the ball for 3 seconds, then it's a point. However, if they're able to also, within that 3 seconds or beyond, they're able to find a pass into the starting player who brings the ball into the practice, if that makes sense, they can get 5. Okay. So I guess for them, the incentive is there, right? No matter what happens in this practice, anytime I get into that player there and restart the practice, I can be on top. I can win by just making 1 pass for every time this person now has to maybe potentially do 2 or maybe 3 actions to get those same 5 points. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, the benefit, obviously, me having those players coming in and obviously the ball from the defender going back into that player is that when the ball is out of play, it's back into play as quick as possible so that you're not really losing a lot of time outside of it. So there's not much dead time. So in those 90 seconds or 60 seconds or 2 minutes that you put together, the intensity is through the roof. So that's probably how I look to kind of address that in terms of, predominantly, and that can work with any ability. That can work with a low ability, an advanced player. We just change the area sizes and potentially the times that they're working within those grids.
Nice. I like it a lot. I think for people listening and watching this, it has everything. It has, the transition. It has the, like you said, the high intensity. It has the game realistic elements to it as well. I love the point about the different points scoring systems because that's creating and giving the players decisions, ownership. What do I do when I'm on the ball? How can I be effective? It adds that competitive element as well. If you're on the opposite side and, you maybe just lost out to 5 points. I always talk to players about this. If the opposite team just got the 5 point element of the game, well, you want to get 5 points as well. You don't just want to go for 1. You want to try and put a little bit of pressure onto yourself. And, and I think pressure people sometimes look at it as a bit of negative when you add in competition and things like that. But actually, that is going to help you become more confident and comfortable on the ball because ultimately you have to make decisions. Ultimately, you have to take risks and make those different choices that you may do, whether it's going individually or whether it's combining. So, yeah, it's fantastic. And on that point as well, just thinking of something, would you ever sort of, say, for example, like you said, you can obviously work with various age groups and abilities. Would you ever do it so that maybe, there's 2v1 in the middle rather than just 1v1?
100%. It's definitely something I've done in the past. Depending on numbers, area sizes, I would adjust area sizes. I could, let's say as an example, I've set that one up based on having 8 players on that grid.
Yeah.
If I had 9, I could put in, depending on the needs of the group, I could put in a 2v1 in the defender's favour
Yeah,
I could put a 2v1 in the attacker's favour because you might have one player who's slightly less able. And obviously, if we come back to the example or the context that you've asked around, if they are lesser ability players, then you might have a 2v1 in the attacking favour.
Yeah.
Alternatively, you might not even have to wait for the 8 players. You can probably do it with 6 players, so that the player on the outside, rather than there being a player between every set of 2 curves, there's one player on either side, and they're just working themselves up and down. And if the defender wins possession, as an example, and they happen to be in the same half of them, then they can get involved. If they're not in the same half, then they're not involved. So there's loads of different ways you can kind of, I guess, adjust that. Again, you might make area sizes tighter if you want to give it more pressure. But obviously, the implications of that is obviously they're going to have to be more technically able and, I guess, quicker off the move and whatnot. Obviously, you might make area size bigger because the space requires, or the number of players requires a slightly bigger area. But there's so many different ways you can kind of progress it in that respect. But as a practice itself, for me, like I said, one of the key things for me and my philosophy is about designing practices that are multifunctional, multi-dynamic, so that no matter what kind of topic I really want to work on, I can get it out from the same practices. So really, if you came to watch some of my sessions, you'd probably see that I probably only have about 7 or 8, maybe max 10 practices that I use.
Yeah.
But I've kind of worked over the years to kind of design in a way where I can work on many different topics within those same, I guess, templates, if you like.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. I think, there's such a sort of common theme which coaches always think: new week or new session, new week, new session, new theme, new session. But I agree with you. I think, and I say simple. What I mean by that is in terms of, like you said, just how the session's set up. It's not rewriting the wheel. It's just you've got your simple area that you set up. Whereas you go down to some sessions and you see coaches cone, then add a couple more cones. And it's almost like you're making a recipe or something, adding a bit of this in, a bit of that in, when actually your recipe is the session itself. How you do your plate, you always have the same plate. It's just you put different things on top of the plate. So yeah, I really like the way that, like you said, it's got so many different outcomes, and it can have so many possible different outcomes for players: attacking and defending, transition, and all of that as well. So yeah, really like it. Again, people in the who are watching and listening, mention in the comments below what you think of the session. Have you done anything similar? And what may you do if you was trying to plan a session based on this topic as well? Cool. So that's the end of the Daily Coaching Football Show. I want to say a big, massive thank you to Coach Yas for sharing his knowledge, insight, expertise into all these different discussions in which he's had today. Shared his five-a-side, and then also in terms of the session, a real quality session for a lot of people to take away, whether it's a practice design or whether it's actual details within the session. So Yas, massive thank you for taking a part in this. Yas, now I know you're doing some great work on your social media and some of the platforms in terms of the coaches network and what you're doing. Are you happy to share what you're doing and where people can find that at?
Yeah, definitely, Dave. First and foremost, thank you for obviously having me tonight. Very much enjoyed it. Hopefully it's been insightful in some ways, if that's all possible, for the listeners. But yeah, if anyone wants to kind of get in touch and maybe know a bit about what I'm doing and maybe have some questions beyond this, feel free to reach out to me on social media. So I'm on Instagram at The Coaches Network, and on Twitter at The Coaches Net. So, similar to Dave, got my own podcast, and there's a range of different guests that I've got on there, both past and present coaches, and even some current and ex-players as well, who've share their insights, their lessons learned, and give us loads of, I guess, if you like, golden nuggets and tips for success in youth development. Again, that's the Coaches Network podcast. Instagram is The Coaches Network, and on Twitter at The Coaches Net.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, listen, anybody watching, highly recommend you to go and visit them. Number one, some fantastic conversations. I'm not going to tell them too many guests because I want them to find out for themselves. But listen, when I say it, some unbelievable guests. And we're not just talking just on names, but also expertise as well. And yeah, great insight from Yas and what the Coaches Network is doing. So yeah, highly recommend you to go and visit that. Make sure you give them a follow. Make sure you subscribe to his channel, this channel. Comment on what you thought about the show. And yeah, highly recommend you to get in touch with Yas as well. Like I said, very knowledgeable person, hence why I wanted to get him on here. And yeah, share that great insight for everyone to take away. So Yas, again, massive thank you. And hopefully everybody else has enjoyed the show. And I look forward to seeing everybody soon for the next one.